Well, thank you and good evening. I would like to remind the audience that I am from Vancouver. First, this is mid-afternoon, and secondly, it's 10 degrees warmer in Vancouver. In any case, what a pleasure it is to be able to introduce the first part of the evening. And that first part of the evening is about a discussion between two very interesting individuals who are going to kind of help us get our mind around the moment and the complexities of the triangle. And that triangle is the United States and China, Canada and the United States, and the third part is United States and China? The triangle. And this is a way now that in all of our strategic thinking, the three parts are coming together. I'm not sure how many of you know our principal guest and speaker this evening, Professor Graham Allison from Harvard University. Can you put up your hands if you have ever heard that name? Hey, not bad. How many of you have heard of his recent book, which has as a key part of the title, The Thucydides Trap? Is that something that's in the mind? Professor Allison, you've got a very warm group to speak to then this evening. To introduce Graham Allison is to introduce one of the major figures in U.S. scholarship and public policy advice and framing in the United States. Professor Allison is the Douglas Dillon Professor at Harvard University and was the founding director of what became the Kennedy School of Government, that is now the Harvard Kennedy School. And when I was a graduate student in the 1970s, his book on the Cuban Missile Crisis, Essence of Decision, was a book that every PhD student read everywhere in North America. It was about the Cold War. It was about the darkest moment of the Cold War, which was the conflict in 1962 between the United States and China that took the world to the edge of a nuclear exchange. And Professor Allison's analysis of that and his introduction of the idea of bureaucratic politics, an idea that states don't always act in rational ways, but get caught up in the terms of the players in the game who are involved in a decision. And for a group of people here, many of you are public servants, bureaucratic decision-making is not an oxymoron. It's an idea that you have to understand where people sit to understand where they stand. Well, he's here this evening to talk with us about contemporary affairs and the U.S.-China relationship in particular. His book, The Thucydides Trap, is Inevitable Conflict. Graham, what is the title of the book? Destined for War. Can we show the book up higher? Destined for War. Can the U.S. and China escape the Thucydides trap? And for those of you who aren't scholars of ancient Greece and haven't read Thucydides, what Professor Allison has done in this book is introduce the dilemma that we face in the context of a rising China and the fear that this creates in another country, not Athens and not Sparta, but in the United States. And the Allison book on this is in the tradition of great Harvard books. Harvard professors like Professor Joseph Nye have written some pretty great books, but he made a concept like soft power, an idea that has global resonance. His colleague Sam Huntington wrote a book that had the phrase in it, The Clash of Civilizations, that has also grabbed international attention, not just on the academic front, but on people who are living in the world. And this new book that has that key phrase in it, the Thucydides Trap, is about the dilemma of this rising power and that is China, and the fear that it creates in the United States. His title, Destined for War, is not about the inevitability of that, but looking back through history when a rising power confronts an established power, the propensity, the likelihood of that kind of conflict, unless the right actions are taken. And having him here in Canada, where in advance of a new government coming to power, in advance of a situation that everyone in this room knows is a very tight diplomatic tension, a rift between Canada and China. But we all know that the bigger picture is the United States and China, and how we position ourselves, how we think through that conflict. There's no one that we could have thought, and the Public Policy Forum could have thought could have been better at helping us understand that situation. And maybe if there's a little bit of room for middle powers and others, including Canada, to maneuver. I should mention one other thing about Professor Allison that has been, from my perspective, a remarkable aspect of his thinking. And that's been the exploration that he has conducted of Singapore's views on the world. His book on Lee Kuan Yew, the Singapore Prime Minister, the founding Prime Minister, the insights he got from that, I think as Canada is seeing its way through what in the world does a little or a medium-sized country do, his insights into Singapore and how a small country or a medium-sized country can make a difference in the US-China relationship at the right moment and in the right way is, I hope, going to be the topic for the discussion this evening. He's going to be interviewed by a fellow named Ed Greenspun. Now, who is this guy? How many of you know Ed Greenspun? I think, Ed, you're not doing very well over in the left part of the audience here. Ed is a person that many of us admired for many years as his career as a journalist, and then as a kind of organizer, both within the Globe and Mail and other publications that he's been involved with. But Ed Greenspun is essentially a curious provocateur. He takes an issue and tries to find angles on it that open up a good public discussion. So that in the year 2016, when he was appointed to his role as president and CEO of the Public Policy Forum, he brought not just a career as a journalist to the subject, but he also brought a mind that liked to convene people at the right moment on the right issue. And with Kevin Lynch, for 18 months, he ran a series of meetings on where Canada and China should be going. That report that Ed helped write and certainly put on the tracks was published in 2018, 2 months before the arrest of Madame Meng Wanzhou in my city of Vancouver. And the distance between what we looked at in the Canada-China relationship just 13 months ago and where we are now raises, everyone in this room knows that the stakes are higher, the issues more difficult, and the need for wisdom and insight more serious. So could I ask you to welcome our guest, Graham Allison, and his interrogator, Ed Greenspun, for a good discussion to be the first part of the evening. We'll get into a panel discussion later, but now it's a tete-a-tete. Thank you, and enjoy the next session.